Whether it be Steve Keane, Bob Bradley, or Tony Adams, the Premier League has been home to some truly world-class managers over the years, who could do it all. But remarkably, some managers have even greater legacies within the league than the three Mount Rushmore-worthy names that I just reeled off. I know. It is tough to believe, but I promise you it's true. Over the past 4 months, we have taken a look at the greatest players of the Premier League era in every position, as the Greed League celebrates 30 years since its breakaway from the Football League. But we're not stopping there. Oh no. There can be no great team without a great manager. Except perhaps for the Chelsea team that won the Champions League under Roberto Di Matteo. So in the build-up to our greatest Premier League 11, it is inevitable that we need to see who might be best equipped to take up a seat in the dugout. Comparing the greatness of managers in a specific league is, simply put, much more difficult than comparing the greatness of players. And this was far trickier than any of the player sevens in my opinion. I mean, how do you even begin to compare someone like Antonio Conte, who is clearly an outstanding manager and has won a Premier League title, but hasn't even had 3 seasons in the Premier League yet, with someone like Sam Allardyce, who has won more games in the Premier League than Conte has even managed, but has never come close to winning the league title, which you would then have to caveat with the fact that he has never been at a club where you would have expected him to really challenge for the league title. It is not easy, is the point that I'm trying to get at. And whilst I think that the player sevens were all quite consistent, based on my criteria of quality and quantity of performances in the Premier League, I'm not sure that this one is. In fact, I am absolutely certain that it is not. It is extremely subjective, and I would urge you all, despite the fact that I made it, to totally disregard it as the isolated view of a single lunatic on the internet. But you might enjoy it anyway, and since you've made it this far through another one of my unnecessarily long introductions, you might as well give it a go. Here are the 7 greatest managers of the Premier League era in the views of this psychopath and this psychopath alone. Psychopath is a bit harsh, Alf. You just struggle to find a consistent criteria. Oh well. Psychopath it is. 7th, Claudio Ranieri. A man who illustrates, quite possibly better than anyone else, the difficulties in formulating a 7 of this ilk. It would be fair to say that Claudio Ranieri has had his ups and downs in the Premier League. In 4 seasons at Chelsea, Ranieri finished 6th, 4th, and finally 2nd, following a summer in which he was backed by Roman Abramovich's billions, before he was replaced by Jose Mourinho. At Leicester City, more than a decade later, Ranieri won the league in his debut campaign in what is by far the greatest upset and achievement any manager has accomplished during the Premier League era, before getting sacked just the following season with the Foxes threatened with relegation. And most recently, Ranieri has had 2 very short-lived stints at Fulham and Watford where he had a win percentage of less than 20%. As you can see then, when you look at Ranieri's Premier League career as a whole, there are lots of factors that you have to weigh up, and he would do well to crack even the top 20 were it not for his remarkable title win at Leicester in 2016. However, he did win the Premier League title, Leicester did do the unthinkable, and no manager in this 7 can put their name, or even hold a candle, to a more remarkable achievement than that. What's more, it is worth remembering the context in which Ranieri was appointed at the King Power Stadium. Leicester had pulled off a great escape under Nigel Pearson the previous season, who was sacked in acrimonious circumstances over the summer, allegedly linked to his son James's role in a racist sex tape that was filmed during the Foxes' pre-season tour of Thailand. Ranieri's appointment was not a particularly popular one, and was treated with great skepticism by a lot of people, including myself. Ranieri had just been sacked after only 4 games in charge of the Greece national team, which concluded with a defeat against the Faroe Islands. Leicester were, unsurprisingly then, among the favourites to be relegated once again, but Ranieri was able to implement an exhilarating and remarkably effective brand of counter-attacking football. He created a tremendous dressing room environment, and he brought out the best in every single player in that squad. It cannot have been easy keeping those players, most of whom had 0 experience in that type of scenario, level-headed, and on top of their game whilst they went on such an inconceivable run. But Ranieri did it, and that achievement alone, aided a little bit by 4 decent years at Chelsea, is enough to merit him squeaking in. 6th, David Moyes. The juxtaposition between Claudio Ranieri and David Moyes is an emphatic one, the latter of whom has never won a Premier League title, or come particularly close to doing so, despite predominantly having managed teams who were perceived as having greater title prospects, albeit still pretty limited, than Leicester City. Nonetheless, whilst Moyes' trophy cabinet may look a little scarce, I still think that you can count the number of greater Premier League managers than him on a single hand. Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger are the only managers to have won more games during the Premier League era than Moyes, and Ferguson, Wenger and Harry Redknapp are the only managers to have taken charge of a team in more Premier League fixtures. The vast majority of Moyes' Premier League management to date came during his more than 11 years at Everton, where he did an outstanding job. Moyes inherited an Everton team that was mired in a relegation scrap, off the back of 4 very successful seasons at Preston North End, and he was able to guide them to safety. Moyes managed to transform Everton into the best of the rest for much of his time at Goodison Park, and even cracked the top 4 at a time when many said that it couldn't be done. He did all of that on a shoestring budget, as Everton spent less than the likes of Birmingham City, Middlesbrough and Bolton Wanderers during his time at the club. Everyone knows about Moyes' subsequent short-lived stint at Manchester United, but replacing Alex Ferguson was in many ways an impossible job, as was the Sunderland job that Moyes took on in 2016, albeit for rather different reasons. Ultimately though, whilst his lack of trophies and the fact that the jury is still out as to whether he can do it at the very highest level had to restrict him to a spot in 6th, Moyes is probably the greatest mid-table manager of the Premier League era, and he is proving his talents yet again at West Ham, who he has also taken from relegation concerns to European football and even the semi-finals of the UEFA Europa League. Probably shouldn't have volleyed a ball at a ballboy though, and then used the fact that it sat up nicely for him to hit as an excuse. You know, with the benefit of hindsight. I'm sure it seemed like a great idea at the time. 5th, Jurgen Klopp. Time and trophies are the only things that count against Jurgen Klopp, in a Premier League context, who has undoubtedly done one of the finest jobs in the history of the Premier League, if not all of English football, at Liverpool to date. Whilst Klopp is not solely responsible for Liverpool's turnaround on his watch, no manager acts in isolation, and all are dependent on external factors to some extent, it is tough to imagine that any other manager in all of world football would have been capable of orchestrating such a meteoric rise. Although Liverpool had finished second in the 2013-14 campaign, just 2 seasons before Klopp arrived, so much of that success was down to Luis Suarez alone, who had since departed, and Liverpool didn't look anything like a title-winning team by October 2015. Klopp's first starting 11 at Liverpool included the likes of Simon Mignolet, Mamadou Sakho, and Alberto Moreno. Since Klopp arrived, almost 7 years ago, Liverpool's recruitment has arguably been the best in world football, but the way in which Klopp has nurtured those players and created a system in which they have flourished has been pretty spectacular. I have said numerous times before on this channel that even when Liverpool have missed out on the title to Manchester City, I don't think that they have got enough credit for driving perhaps the greatest and almost certainly the most efficient Premier League team of all time quite so close. Klopp has the 3rd highest win percentage of any manager during the Premier League era, and this season, he and Liverpool have the potential to do something unprecedented in the entire history of English football. On sheer managerial ability, I think you would probably be able to make a compelling case for Klopp coming even higher than 5th. But the fact that he has only won 1 Premier League title, at the time of recording, potentially 2 by the end of this season, and his achievements at Liverpool outside of the Premier League sadly aren't relevant to this 7, restricts him to a spot in 5th. Just for now. 4th, Jose Mourinho. one place behind Jurgen Klopp in terms of the Premier League's all-time managerial rankings based solely on win percentage, but one place ahead of him in this 7, Jose Mourinho is one of only 5 managers to have won more than 200 games during the Premier League era. Brought to the Premier League as Claudio Ranieri's replacement at Chelsea in 2004, Mourinho's first stint with the Blues was fairly remarkable. Even with by far the deepest pockets of any team in the division, to win back-to-back Premier League titles, and indeed back-to-back League and Cup doubles, in your first 2 seasons in charge, at a club that hadn't won a top-flight league title since 1955, well, I guess you could describe that as being pretty special. I can remember it being fairly shocking at the time, but it seems even more outrageous now that after winning 6 trophies in only 3 seasons, including 2 Premier League titles, Jose Mourinho was sacked, or forced to leave by mutual consent, and replaced by Avram Grant following a 1-1 draw with Rosenborg in the Champions League. Mourinho later returned to Chelsea, where he won a 3rd Premier League title before a horrific title defence saw him sacked once again. That bruising experience seemed to change Mourinho a little, and I have made a whole video about how it seemed to have impacted and changed him not that long ago, should you be interested. It should be said that he took Manchester United to their highest league finish since Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement as Premier League runners-up, an achievement that was matched by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer last season, but is yet to be exceeded. Mourinho also won the Europa League at Old Trafford, but as with Klopp, his European exploits aren't relevant to this 7. Mourinho's last job in the Premier League at Tottenham Hotspur was his least successful, and it marked the first time since taking over at Porto in 2002 that Mourinho had left a club without winning a single trophy. His win percentage at Tottenham was lower than Maurizio Pochettino's and Antonio Conte's, and only narrowly better than Nuno Espirito Santo's. But in spite of that undoubted drop-off, Mourinho's overall legacy and the work that he has done in the Premier League means that he is unfortunate, in my opinion, not to make a podium finish. 3rd, Pep Guardiola. The biggest blight on Pep Guardiola's record at Manchester City, if you can call it that, has been his inability to guide the club to their first Champions League crown. However, this 7 is concerned solely with the Premier League, and in the Premier League, Guardiola's record is practically flawless. No manager has a better win percentage than Guardiola during the Premier League era, and it isn't even close. Pep's 74% win percentage at the Etihad is not just by far and away the highest win percentage of any manager in the Premier League, it's actually even better than Pep's own win percentage at FC Barcelona. It might surprise you to discover. I know it surprised me. And it is almost neck and neck with his record at Bayern Munich. There will be those who say, well, yes, he has had lots of money to spend and he inherited some very good players. And that is undoubtedly true. But it's worth remembering that wasn't the narrative when Guardiola first arrived. Man City had finished 4th the season before Pep arrived, 15 points behind title winners Leicester City, and tied on points with Manchester United in 5th. There was rather a large consensus spanning from pundits to fans, particularly after Man City finished 3rd in Guardiola's debut campaign, and Conte's Chelsea romped to the league title miles ahead of them, that he wouldn't be able to replicate the way in which he played in La Liga and in the Bundesliga in the Premier League. It just wouldn't work. Well, Guardiola refused to compromise, and the results have been emphatic. He is the only manager ever to win 100 points in a single Premier League season, and he followed that up with 98 points the following season. Guardiola has changed the way that football is played in England, and in 5 seasons, he has won as many Premier League titles as Jose Mourinho won in 9.5 seasons, and as many as Arsene Wenger won in 22. It is quite possible that Guardiola could make that 4 titles in only 6 seasons this season, which would put him second only to Alex Ferguson during the Premier League era. So, he starts the countdown of my top 3. 2nd, Arsene Wenger. I should imagine that there won't be too many surprises about my top 2, but I will justify them nonetheless, along with a quick word for those managers who just missed out. As I said, Pep Guardiola has won as many Premier League titles as Arsene Wenger in less than a quarter of the time, and he could have won more than Wenger ever did by the time that this season has concluded. However, context is important, longevity is important, and greatness is about more than trophies alone. Arsene Wenger inherited an Arsenal team that had finished 5th, 12th, 4th, and 10th in the 4 seasons before he arrived, and his appointment caught a lot of people off guard. Brought in from Nagoya Grampus 8 in Japan, Arsene Who was the headline in the Evening Standard on the day that the Frenchman was appointed. But Wenger took a team that was built on strong foundations with a very solid backline and turned it into one of the most free-flowing and entertaining teams that the Premier League has ever seen, whilst retaining those strong foundations and an excellent work ethic. Arsenal's signings in Wenger's first 5 seasons at the club, from Robert Pires to Thierry Henry, were absolutely out of this world. And for 8 seasons, between 1997-98 and 2004-05, Arsenal never finished lower than 2nd. Unfortunately for them, and for Arsene Wenger, the brilliance of Manchester United and later Chelsea meant that they only, with only in inverted commas there, won 3 Premier League titles during that time. Wenger shaped the future of English football more so than any other manager during the Premier League era, including Alex Ferguson. His recruitment, training, and dietary methods modernised the league like you wouldn't believe, dragging it into the 21st century, as the drinking culture that still hung around from the First Division era was largely wiped out, and a new breed of artist and athlete was born. Even in Wenger's later years, when Arsenal struggled to compete for league titles, it must be remembered that the Gunners were spending just a fraction of what those around them were spending. Yet, only in Wenger's last 2 seasons did Arsenal actually slip out of the Champions League places. Wenger holds the record for the most games managed in the Premier League, 828, and the second most wins, 476. But above all else, it was the way in which he moulded the league, having arrived as an unknown quantity, and knocked a dominant Manchester United team off their perch that ensured that Wenger took 2nd place in my 7. First, Tim Sherwood. Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting that, were you? Tim Sherwood is a man who finished 17th at Aston Villa and reached an FA Cup final. And after they sacked him, that's right, they were relegated in dead last. A lesson for life, don't doubt Big Tim. The man works miracles. Nah, I'm just kidding. He's rubbish. He is a terrible manager. This was just another one of my many brilliant pranks. First, Alex Ferguson. As predictable as Mexico going out in the round of 16 of the FIFA World Cup, or Ricky Gervais not being able to write a good sitcom without Stephen Merchant, obviously, the greatest manager of the Premier League era is Sir Alex Ferguson. In 21 years of management in the Premier League, Fergie won 13 league titles, that is more than Pep Guardiola, Arsene Wenger, Jose Mourinho, Antonio Conte, and Claudio Ranieri combined. I could probably leave it at just that in terms of justifying Ferguson's position in top spot, which I doubt any right-minded person would dispute. But I will embellish you just a little, just for the fun of it. Ferguson took charge at Manchester United when the club was 2nd bottom in the First Division in November 1986, having finished 4th in the previous season. The Red Devils hadn't won a top-flight league title since the 1960s, and in Ferguson's first season, they finished 11th. It wouldn't be until Ferguson's 7th season at Old Trafford, which just so happened to be the inaugural Premier League campaign, that he and Manchester United would finally be crowned as champions of England. I think that it is worth pointing out that in the 1988-89 and 1989-90 seasons, fresh off the back of finishing 2nd in the First Division, Manchester United slipped to 11th and 13th. How many modern managers would survive that at a club like Manchester United? Well, Alex Ferguson did, they were different times, and when the Premier League was born, Manchester United dominated the breakaway division. The most impressive thing about Ferguson, in my view, was his ability to overhaul a squad whilst remaining competitive, and to win league titles with teams built around 3 or 4 different cores during his time at Old Trafford. From that of Bruce, Pallister, Ince, Hughes and co, to the treble-winning team of York, Cole and the class of 92 cohort, and arguably his best ever team with that phenomenal front 3 of Ronaldo, Rooney and Tevez. Ferguson was able to make average players look very good, very good players look great and kept the already great players level-headed. And as soon as he felt that they weren't level-headed, he got rid of them. All things considered, this is just a long way of saying, obviously, Alex Ferguson is the greatest manager of the Premier League era. And either Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola would probably need another decade at Liverpool and Man City if they were going to attempt to change that. In terms of my 26-man shortlist for this video, the 19 managers who made that list but missed out on my final 7 contained 5 Premier League winning managers in Kenny Dalglish, Antonio Conte, Manuel Pellegrini, Roberto Mancini, and Carlo Ancelotti, alongside Rafa Benitez, Harry Redknapp, Sam Allardyce, Maurizio Pochettino, Kevin Keegan, Martin O'Neill, Brendan Rodgers, Bobby Robson, Gerard Houllier, Roy Hodgson, Ron Atkinson, Alan Kirbishley, Sean Dyche, and Steve McLaren. I think there could be a couple of others, Roy Evans springs to mind, who may be unfortunate to miss out on that shortlist as well. And of those named, I think Kenny Dalglish, Roy Hodgson, and quite possibly Sam Allardyce would have to complete my top 10. So that is it for today's video, the latest in this unbelievably brilliant series, as critics are describing it. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this series, but for all of the outstanding content that I am slaving away to produce on HITC Sevens. You can also find me on social media, on either Twitter or on Instagram, via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.